Hello, I'm Ruth and I work in the operations department for Society of London Theatre, as well as assisting with managing our office in the West End and with many major projects and events to help promote and protect theatre. I also get the chance to look after our company archive. Now this is an excellent job because we have some wonderful artefacts in there, including London theatre guides dating back to 1922. So today I am delighted to take you through my top 5 historical theatre facts, and we're going to start with number 5. Now the coronavirus pandemic is not the first time that theatres have been shut down due to an infectious illness. In the 16th and 17th centuries there were wide-scale theatre closures because of the bubonic plague. Now, these were repeated theatre closures, but they were, there was one year where I believe, throughout the period of about 4 years, they worked out that theatres were closed for something like 17 months. In fact, owing to the current pandemic, many scholars and historians are starting to revisit the life and works of Shakespeare and noticing many similarities between our situation and theirs. There are actually plenty of references to things like quarantining and social distancing, which we all recognise today. Now it seems, when Shakespeare was in lockdown, he looked to writing poetry to keep himself sane. Now, this does make me wonder, what sort of excellent things are being produced at the moment for when we come out of lockdown? Like maybe there's a Shakespeare out there, I don't know. And that moves me on to point number 4. Now, it isn't just infectious illnesses and pandemics and epidemics that have closed down theatres. In 1642, the Puritan-led Parliament forced the closure of theatre for 18 years. Now, they said that theatre stopped people from worshipping God and that plays were representative, and I've got it here, of lascivious mirth. In essence, theatre was too much fun. Now we all know that. Now, many historians now argue that the closure of theatres was actually in line with the civil wars at the time, and they thought that the gathering of large crowds would lead to civil unrest. So during these dark years of no theatre, many actors whose craft had been interrupted by the Puritan-led closure of theatres actually sided with the Royalists. And because of this, when Charles II eventually came to the throne after this 18 years, he reopened theatres immediately and supported the construction of many of the famous venues we know today, including the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden and Theatre Royal Drury Lane. Thanks, Charles! And that leads me on quite nicely to my third point. Now, until 1660, women weren't allowed to act in theatre. Now, before then, all female roles were played by male actors. So, for example, a young boy would be cast in the role of Lady Macbeth, maybe, because he had a higher pitched voice and a slightly smaller figure. And it is in part Charles II who we have to thank again for this change, because in the patents for Theatre Royal Drury Lane and the Royal Opera House, he stated that all female roles must be played by women actors. Now, this was partly due to the homophobic attitudes at the time, because there was this belief that men dressing up as women could in some way promote homosexuality. However, it did lead to the rise of some fantastic and well-known playwrights that we have today, and there's some incredible pictures out there of them, paintings of these beautiful women in elaborate styles. Fact number 2. The satire boom. Now, in the early 1960s, there was a rise in satirical comedy in the West End. Theatre companies began creating plays which poked fun at and criticised political figures and members of the royal family. This movement began with a show called Beyond the Fringe, which showed in the West End, I believe, in 1962. Now, the reaction to this show was recently portrayed in Series 2, Episode 10 of Netflix's The Crown, in an episode where Prime Minister Harold Macmillan sits sweating and embarrassed whilst the cast mock him and point him out in an audience of cackling onlookers. Whilst this may have been embarrassing for a few, it did lead to the rise of many well-known playwrights today, including one of my favourites, Alan Bennett. And it also led to less censorship in the arts, because following this the laws were changed and governments didn't have to check over scripts and things like that. So it's incredible fact, really. One of my favourites, actually. Now, drum roll please, because this is my absolutely favourite theatre historical fact. And we're on to fact number 1. Now, have you ever wondered where the term box office comes from? Now, as I said, it's one of my favourites because I previously worked on a box office, and I found this out when I was on a tour of the globe. Now, in the early days of theatres used to be packed to the rafters with people. You wouldn't just have seats everywhere. In the stalls, people would be standing. In the circle, people would go to be seen, so that they might have slightly comfier seating. And then probably in the upper circle, they would have maybe benches and things like that. And because of this, there was a much larger capacity in theatres, even if modern day health and safety standards were compromised. So instead of pre-booking a theatre ticket, audience members would just come in and put their money in a box as they entered. Now, just to put this into scale, I went into a venue once, and in a venue now which has a capacity of maybe 700 people, they believed they would fit 4,000 people into the auditorium. So that just goes to show how crammed in people really were back in the day. Now, when venues evolved and people desired to book their ticket more in advance, the box got its own office, and that was complete now with a staff who help us book our tickets and also ensure our health and safety is paramount. Now, don't forget that as well as being entertainment venues steeped in culture, many theatres in London and in the UK are also steeped in history. So when theatres do reopen, I check your local venue to see if they offer any theatre tours or backstage tours throughout the year. I have been lucky enough to enjoy tours of places such as the Globe, the RSC, the National, the Royal Opera House. When they've put them on, I've always tried to book a ticket to look round. However, one of my first was actually in my local venue, the Royal and Derngate, and their tour, which was called Behind the Curtain, was this immersive, spectacular piece which I'll never ever forget. And I think there is just something about knowing a venue and an auditorium's history that makes sitting down and watching a play in it just that extra bit special. Thank you for joining me today in my top 5 historical theatre facts. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to Official London Theatre, hit the thumbs up and put a comment down below of your favourite historical theatre fact. And I'll see you when theatres reopen.